Chapter 2 of David I. Smith's book, Learning from the Stranger, certainly carried a compelling title for Chapter 2 in Culture and Bad Breath. At the beginning, we are asked to close our eyes and imagine a person from a different culture. Perhaps because of the war we have been fighting for the last 15 years, I envisioned an older man with wrinkled face, long white beard, wearing a pacté turban, and a long Afghan Parahan tunban. The author's brief experiment trapped me into identifying many of the outward signs of culture, but not the internal makeup of that person. The point the author is making is that cultural awareness goes beyond simply recognizing someone's physical differences. He gave many examples of situations where someone might look similar to me but have entirely different human experiences, which demonstrate true cultural difference. For instance, he mentioned individuals getting comments trying to exit a bus when they were crossing a railroad track, as in their country, buses do not stop over railroads. Or take the situation of addressing a person by name. In the United States, we casually use a person's first name when greeting them, but in other parts of the world, that is not the case. While these instances seem innocent for the person from another culture, they are daily reminders that they do not belong. I've had cases like this in business when I've had a chance to work with some people from international, and I remember one time that there was an issue in shaking hands. That wasn't the custom of the individual I was greeting, and definitely it was a learning experience for me. So I understand what the author's conveying in that piece. David I. Smith mentions that culture is like bad breath. You tend to notice it in others before you notice it in yourself. I agree with the author that what we see can be framed by our experiences, expectations, and various media that sometimes make us see things as we have been conditioned to see them. Beyond sight, the sounds we hear can also make us associate certain feelings or images that we hold to be exclusive to who we are without understanding they are heard in a much different manner in different cultures. Ultimately, as we consider our interactions with various cultures, we only have to go as far as the products we wear or drive or use in our everyday life to see the vast amount of cultures we experience on a daily basis. The author used vivid examples of how the words we use can be interpreted quite differently. Even in situations where everyone speaks the same language, there might be customs or traditions that interfere with communication, as one party does not understand the norms of the other party. This can lead to a breakdown in communication, insult, and even adversarial positioning. In my business, we do tend to have a lot of young people, a lot of millennials, and I find that that there's definitely a difference in the communication and what the perception of normal is for the millennials. They've yet to understand what some of their standpoints, some of the things they support, or the way they view things can be off-putting to someone else. I have a situation right now dealing with the empowerment of women, and something that the company stands behind, and we do have situations where some people want to take that to a degree that that really will create divisiveness instead of inclusivity, and I try and explain to them what the most important objective is, which is for everybody to be working together, not separate. My favorite part of this chapter was when the author recounted two stories about something as simple as eating in a restaurant, and how three cultures, the US being one of them, Germany and China, handle these things differently, and how they can have entirely different expectations of how the meal should progress. A German couple, for instance, might arrive to a restaurant and not be used to having to wait for a table. As in their culture, you typically walk in, seat yourself, and if there is not a separate table for yourself, you might join another party who's already engaged in their meal. This same German couple is surprised to receive tap water without being asked. And they are also surprised by the speed of the service, the expectation of tips, and the fact that you don't typically linger after your meal. A group of Chinese patrons are surprised to find their table is not round, and that each guest is handed a menu, as it is traditional for one member of the group to order all of the food for the table and pay for the meal. The Chinese guests are not accustomed to how overcooked the food might be, and they do not typically order dessert. So when asked by their server if they want additional food, it might trigger an insult to the patron of that meal that not enough food was provided. In some regard, I disagree with the author's blanket assessment that these situations might always cause harm or make somebody upset. As for me, part of the interest in traveling to international countries is the expectation that I will experience new things or new or different ways that people conduct themselves. In a sense, these differences are the things I remember and discuss with others. They are not disappointments, because in some respects I expect my mores and ways to be challenged. I remember two different distinct experiences traveling. One was the first time I went to Italy and did not realize how they handle seating in some of their restaurants, and that if you choose to sit at a table, you actually pay what is called a coperto, an extra fee. It was a surprise the first couple times that I started looking at my bill, but something I quickly learned differently. I've also had situations in countries where when asked for a different utensil to use, that they didn't wash it. They simply sprinkled some vinegar on a napkin and wiped it off and handed it to me. Something I would not expect to have happen in the United States, but certainly happened in that country. Getting back to the book, Bowley and Eliot address a term they call facade diversity, which calls into question the types of celebrations that we have here in the U.S. sometimes around multiculturalism and cultural awareness celebrations. And they posit that that while they're well-intentioned and might seem that we're championing differences in cultures by recognizing it, that in some cases we're actually homogenizing these individuals and their ethnicities and cultures into more of one global society. They warn that this homogenization and diversity and globalization theory only provides a glimpse of cultural experiences and mores, and does little to describe the underlying contexts that make a culture unique. Ultimately, what the author, David S. Smith, tries to imply in his book is that cultural differences are lived out in our actions, behaviors, and our values. And these lived behaviors might lock us into certain expectations we find normal, but others might find abnormal. While we might not intend to offend someone from another culture or to make them feel uncomfortable, sometimes our simple, normal attitudes and actions can be offensive and confusing, sort of like bad breath that we cannot smell. Thank you.